A lot of times, we look at Chromebook spec sheets and we get excited about screens or processor speeds. But with the Acer Chromebook 15, what we're going to be talking about today, none of the spec sheets actually get anybody excited. Most of the stuff is kind of middling. It's got a decent processor, and a decent keyboard, and a decent screen, and all those things, and none of them are bad and none of them are best. It's not the best at really anything. However, what Acer's done here with this device is take a bunch of decent things and put them together to make a really, really excellent, solid, holistic package. So we want to dive in and show you why. So first up, let's talk about build quality. Acer's done a really, really great job here. Most of the device is aluminum, so the lid, the surround around the screen, and the deck and the sides of it are all aluminum, and it's a powdered finished aluminum, not the brushed finish, so it doesn't pick up a lot of fingerprints. And all that aluminum makes for a nice sturdy chassis while coming in at a full pound lighter and 3/4 of an inch thinner than its predecessor, which was all plastic and should have been lighter. So Acer's done a really great job with that. Now the bottom is plastic, and honestly that's okay. We don't turn the device over and look at it that often, and it serves its purpose just fine, just like the HP Chromebook 13 G1 did. Overall, I give Acer a huge thumbs up here. They didn't do anything groundbreaking or anything mesmerizing with the build of this device, but it works and it looks good and it feels nice and firm and solid and substantial in the hand. Next up, let's talk about the screen. So we're dealing with a 1080p screen here on a 15.6 inch display. So 16 by 9, again, nothing out of the ordinary. It is a touch screen and it is IPS, so you get nice wide viewing angles. It's not the brightest thing I've ever seen, somewhere around 250 to 300 nits. So it's not completely disappointing. It's also not amazing. So you get it outside in direct sunlight, you're probably gonna run into a few issues. But overall, again, Acer's put a decent panel in here. The viewing angles are really good. The colors are really good. The touch sensitivity is really good. I really don't have too many complaints about it. Sure, when I set it up next to my Pixelbook, I notice the difference. But overall, 1080p on a 15.6 inch display is the right resolution for this display. Items are the right size on the display, and it just kind of gets out of the way. It feels good, it looks good, and it behaves just as you would expect it to. Next up, we need to talk about the keyboard and the trackpad, because once again, Acer's done some pretty cool stuff here. The keyboard feels similar to what other Acer offerings feel like. A tad bit mushy, not the clickiest thing in the world, but a good amount of travel. What's really cool here is at this price point, they've included a backlit keyboard. So you get multi-stage backlighting, 6 stages in all, and it's really nice to have if you're in a dimly lit environment. If we're seeing Acer put in a $299 to $399 Chromebook backlighting at this price point, I just don't see why it is that most Chromebooks don't come with it. At this point, they don't, so it's still kind of a perk, and Acer did well to include it. Additionally, the trackpad is pretty good sized. Again, it's very similar to other Acer devices, the Chromebook 14, last year's 15. It's plastic. It blends in pretty well with the Chromebook overall, and the aesthetic looks good. But this is probably my biggest pain point with this device, and I've read online that other people have had the same thing. The multi-click thing that I've talked about in other Chromebooks is present here. So the trackpad kind of floats just a little bit before you push it down, then it hits the mechanism and then clicks. And so you get that weird kind of floating thing that's happening. And sometimes when you're typing, you can even hear it moving around. It's just loose. Granted, I could open up the Chromebook and fix this. It's not that difficult to fix, but it's not something you should have to fix. And I've heard a few people complain about the same thing. So bear that in mind. If you're really picky with your trackpad, that could be something that turns you off with this one. But overall, the tracking of it, the smoothness of the gestures, I mean, we kind of go over this a lot. Chrome OS does really well with that stuff. As far as getting through the UI, this one does just fine. I just don't really care for the click mechanism. Next up, let's talk about input and output. So this device actually has what has become pretty standard at the end of 2017 for Chromebooks, and what looks like is going to stay standard through probably the early parts of 2018 at least. So usually you have Chromebooks with either just a couple USB-Cs, or you have this layout, which is 2 USB-Cs, 2 USB-As. And there's usually one on each side. And for me personally, it's my favorite layout. So you get all the benefits of USB-C, like your monitor out, going straight through that, plus your power, and you can use either side, whichever one is more convenient. But then you also have USB-A for those peripherals that need some sort of dongle, and you don't actually have to have a dongle with you. So it's kind of a nice setup, and I do wish that they had that on some of the other premium Chromebooks. Additionally, you have a micro SD card slot and a Kensington lock. This one comes with 32 gigs of internal storage, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the micro SD card slots, again, is a nice addition to have now that Android apps are available on these devices. And you're going to download a little bit more movies, more pictures, that kind of stuff. It's nice to have some additional storage, and this one's very, very easy to just slide an extra card in the side to expand your storage. Additionally, you have a audio jack that serves just like every other Chromebook, so microphone, headphone jack, but you have some really great speakers and some really cool machined holes that are on both sides of the keyboard, and it just looks really great, but additionally it sounds really great. And let's let you have a test and hear it right now. So yeah, those speakers sound amazing, and by far, of any Chromebook, probably any laptop I've actually heard, these are the best sounding speakers. So if that's something, most times when I review these devices, that's honestly the least of my worries. I will say, and I've said throughout this video, there's a bunch of middling specs. This is where they actually are proficient. They're the best speakers I've heard on a laptop in a long, long time. So well done for that, Acer. And we can't talk about Chromebooks without talking about what's inside of them. And with this device, you get, again, some pretty middling specs, but they work. And we're going to discuss why they work here in just a second. What's inside is a Pentium N4200, 4 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of internal storage. 32 gigs of internal storage is enough to get most people by. If you're going to be downloading lots of movies, slap an SD card in the side. But otherwise, 32 gigs is probably enough to get most people by on a Chromebook. 4 gigs of RAM. Again, it's enough for most people on a Chromebook. Take the Samsung Chromebook Pro, for instance. It still only comes with 4 gigs of RAM. And honestly, for most people's day-to-day use, is plenty. The Pentium N4200. Now, it's a step up from, say, the Apollo Lake processor. So it's not in that Core i line. It is a Pentium processor that's in more of the Braswell Apollo Lake line. But it performs pretty well. And we were seeing benchmarks on Octane around 12,000, 11,000 on most days, somewhere in between there. But it gets along just fine. And, benchmarks are synthetic. Real world use, that's where the rubber meets the road. And this device gets along really, really well. I actually used it for a few days as my only work device with an extended display and doing all the things I normally do on my Pixelbook, and really wasn't too frustrated with it. It performs, it gets along way, way better than the spec sheet would have you believe. And so again, Acer's done a good job here of putting in the resources it needs to get by on without breaking the bank. So without any special sections here in this review, we've covered all of it and relatively quickly, and that highlights one of the things that makes this Chromebook kind of unique. And that seems odd to say that there's generic features about a Chromebook that make it unique. But what Acer's done with this device, again, I said it earlier, is they've taken a bunch of specs that don't look very impressive on a spec sheet, put them together in a Chromebook that make a holistic package that is actually really impressive and great to use. It is one of my favorite Chromebooks that I've had in the office since we started this channel. It's just enjoyable. I love the speakers. I like the backlit keyboard. Trackpad annoys me a little bit, but it's got a touch screen for those Android apps that really need touch still. It really just covers so many bases pretty well. It doesn't have the best anything except for the speakers, and yet it's probably one of my favorite Chromebooks for overall use. And then we had to talk about the price. Right now on Amazon, as of the filming of this, before we started, I looked and it was $314. Now, that can fluctuate. The set price for it is $399. So anywhere between there, from $300 to $400, it's a great deal for this device, especially if you get down close to $300. I can't recommend this device enough. It's really great. It gets along way better than the spec sheet would show you, and it's really affordable. And it encourages me to know that affordable Chromebooks are getting really, really good, because we're in an era now of Pixelbooks and Samsung Chromebook Pros where $600 to $800 to $1,000 devices are becoming the norm. It's great to see companies still investing in devices that don't cost an arm and a leg and that are getting really, really good at doing so. Guys, if you like this video, subscribe down below, hit the thumbs up, and until next time, we'll see you.